Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. So, there's been a lot of talk recently about Temu, as well as the parent company behind it, Pinduoduo, which is why earlier this year, while the team was in Hangzhou, we invited Kaifei, one of our close friends, as well as one of the most knowledgeable experts on Pinduoduo in China, to come and share his perspective on Pinduoduo, how it managed to disrupt e-commerce giants such as Alibaba and JD.com, as well as its global ambition through Temu. This podcast was recorded in Chinese and then dubbed into English for you guys, and it was hosted by my colleague Elodie. So we're trying out a new format as we're trying to bring you guys more insights from China. So I hope you guys enjoy it and do leave us some feedback if you have any.
Everyone, welcome to Impulso Podcast. Today we are in Hangzhou with our friend Kaifei. This time around, we are going to have the discussion in Chinese, but we will going to voice over later in post editing, and I have an English version for you to listen to. So let's get started.
Yeah, cool. I think that's we are mainly talking about today is the topic of Temu. It's about Pinduoduo and Temu, and Kaifei is probably one of the most knowledgeable experts on this company in China.
Well, I know a little bit.
Chinese people are always humble.
And Kaifei is always extremely humble.
Yeah, in recent years, we have seen Temu expanding aggressively overseas, opening in nearly 90 countries so far. Their expansion in those countries have been quite bold, which has drawn attention from various sectors, including the media, government, business, and the e-commerce industry. However, most people still don't actually know much about this company.
Yep.
Yeah, and we have seen a lot of media coverage about this company, much of which is relatively negative. For example, there are claims suggesting that the company is dumping cheap products into Western markets or exploiting its suppliers. To start, Kaifei, could you share your overall perspective or general understanding of this company?
Okay, I think there are lots of positive, negative news, but depending on from which angle you see this company, if you take it back to look at history, you will see that Pinduoduo actually emerged relatively later in the whole development of Chinese e-commerce ecosystem.
True.
About 2015, 2016, they started selling fruits in group buy and getting people to share links on WeChat to buy fruit. And of course, you get a discount if you share the link. And then in 2018, 2019, and you see that this company was actually growing very, very fast and went public. And I think in about 2018, they reached about 1 trillion RMB GMV.
Yes.
If you look at back into that history, during that time, Alibaba and Taobao or JD, all these companies started about the year 2000.
Yeah, that's the time Elodie was born, right?
So I learned from the halfway.
So fundamentally, I think everything has to do with time window. So and the second thing is that if you look at Bezos of Amazon, he has his own logic, and in China we say the value propositions of selection, quality, savings, and speed. So if you look at each e-commerce platform, I think Pinduoduo chose a focus which is savings or extreme sort of value for money, and fundamentally, we see the same thing in manufacturing and other sectors. So behind the savings is the extreme control of cost and cost across logistics, manufacturing, as well as customer acquisition, extreme control of cost. Logistic cost as well as organizational efficiency. So from what we see now, as Jianke has mentioned, this company has higher demand towards its suppliers. Of course, because of that, its suppliers and logistics suppliers have a lot of complaints. But fundamentally, things have a lot to do with how the company positions itself. Because if you want to be cheaper than other channels in China, well, I mean, people who have not worked or lived in China might not be familiar with what's going on at the moment. But Pinduoduo, amongst all the platforms in China, is extremely focused on value for money. And if you have, say, 100 products that are on sale in Alibaba, Taobao, JD, and Pinduoduo, maybe Douyin as well, so you would see that probably more than half of them are selling at the cheapest price on Pinduoduo. Maybe the rest 50, I mean, sometimes cheaper here, sometimes cheaper there. But fundamentally, Pinduoduo has more cheaper products than any other platform. So their fundamental positioning would determine how they are actually focusing on saving cost at each of the value chain. So I'm not sure if you read the book Disruptive Innovation. So they talk about the logic. So when you enter a new market, you need to find a positioning that makes it hard for incumbents to attack you. So when we look at when we look back, I mean, JD was actually very similar to Amazon.
Yes.
Very fast and good experience, providing a better customer experience.
Yeah, and its service quality is also quite good. Many middle to high income consumers, especially in first tier cities, really like JDs because it's reliable, offer high quality products, and delivers quickly.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Trustworthy and authentic.
Then Taobao's focus is selection. It has a lot of products, so we call it like omni-potent Taobao.
Yeah, I know it.
You can find everything there.
It's like a treasure hunt.
As an entrepreneur, when you start a company, you have to find an entry point. And the entry point has to be differentiated from others in the industry. So when we look at Colin Huang, the founder of Pinduoduo, when he said earlier, if they were behaving like Taobao or JD, then they will never beat Taobao or JD because they're already there. So they have to become unique selves. So fundamentally, I think the logic is the same as disruptive innovation. You have to find that sweet spot.
Yes, Kaifei. So do you think that around 2015, 2017, that is a crucial time because before that, Colin Huang had already spent a lot of working on various entrepreneur ventures.
Yes.
So at that point, the emergence of company like Pinduoduo, do you think it is inevitable or was there some element of like chances involved?
I think was most probably like inevitable, more than
Yes.
chances.
So it's more inevitable than accidental.
Well, I think when we look back and to look at this company or this team, so the organization I think is very important. So if we look back into that time point when this company started, they had a few advantages they could leverage, as I said just now, or as we have discussed many times before. So the whole e-commerce infrastructure had been sort of completed back then, including the logistic companies becoming faster and faster, and WeChat and Alipay becoming prevalent. So the users are already like quite used to paying online, and people used JD, people used Taobao, and they were already familiar with online shopping. All this had come together. So Pinduoduo was actually standing on the giant's shoulders. And I think this is also what Duan Yongping, the mentor of Pinduoduo's founder, always said, dare to be a latecomer. So Pinduoduo was standing on the shoulders of giants. They used the whole ecosystem built by Alibaba and a few other players. If there were no payment, Alibaba did payment. So there are lots of things which happened back then.
Yes, it just went through.
Yes, so when the logistic was not advanced, Alibaba went to build Cainiao and started working with the 5 e-commerce logistic companies. I think all this provided a foundation for Pinduoduo's birth. But of course, there's also a background, which is the Chinese internet was in walled gardens. Alibaba and Tencent and Baidu, they had different ecosystems. So in this ecosystem, things are not connected. You can't send a Taobao link into WeChat, for example. So that left room for Pinduoduo. And when do we see what to say this team is important? Because in 2015, 2016, there were lots of opportunities to build companies, and you could easily make 100 million RMB.
a small goal, like a small success.
Yes, a small success, and I think a lot of merchants have achieved that goal back then.
Yeah, those merchants earned 100 million yuan.
Yeah, under the WeChat system, there's lots of dividend, and Taobao can't enter this ecosystem. But of course, I mean, JD received investment from Tencent as well, and Tencent passed a e-commerce platform to JD. But JD didn't seize this opportunity. I mean, back to disruptive innovation, you need to find a point. The point here is on WeChat, and for JD, it's very difficult for them to do the mass market. Another dividend was the WeChat red packets. They get a lot of people in the countryside in China to start using online payment. They don't have much money in their wallet. Maybe just 10 yuan, 20 yuan.
But they cultivate the mindset to use digital wallet.
Yes, and with 10 yuan or 20 yuan, you can't buy much from JD anyway.
But you can buy from Temu or Pinduoduo.
Yes, because it's cheap enough. So, and when we look at it, it's really, really cheap. So, in the beginning, if you buy things on JD using JD's logistic infrastructure and send things to the countryside, I mean, nobody in the countryside had a demand for things to arrive the next day. But if you ask me that if you tell me that things will be cheaper, I'm willing to wait.
Yeah, we are willing to wait.
So the WeChat red packets and WeChat Pay got a few users that they are able to buy things online, and JD wanted things to be fast. So that caused JD very hard to work with other logistic companies which can offer things cheap. I think today Amazon faced the same issue, right? I mean, fulfilled by Amazon FBA is expensive, so it's very hard for them to compete against Temu on cheap goods.
Yes, Kaifei, you just mentioned the issue of traffic. In China, the ecosystem of Alibaba and Tencent are both massive and deeply integrated, but they remain largely disconnected from one another. This situation is relatively unique to China. I think overseas we rarely see such isolated ecosystems. In other markets, e-commerce companies focus solely on e-commerce, while other companies handle different sectors without creating such closed ecosystems.
Usually there is no such large and company with all aspects.
Yeah, a complete ecosystem, not Europe. So does that mean that when Pinduoduo expands overseas with Temu, the advantages or dividends they can leverage will be very different?
Yeah, I think of course, I mean, Temu doesn't have the same dividend as Pinduoduo had back in 2015, 2016. So I think in 2015, 2016 there was no Douyin e-commerce, and Alibaba couldn't enter Tencent, and JD was expensive. So it was very difficult for incumbents to attack Pinduoduo when it was rising because they all had baggage. They couldn't do this. Back to your question. I think overseas, I don't think you have this advantage to be able to acquire customers at cheap cost. You don't have WeChat, and back in 2015, 2016, WeChat had the daily active users of almost a billion. And overseas, you have Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp or Telegram. They are good, but they are just social tools, and you don't have something like WeChat, which actually protected Pinduoduo in its early days and let it, I mean, enjoy the dividends in a fairly protected ecosystem. I think this is a challenge. But today, we think that Temu has started a lot of viral sort of tactics to acquire customers. As you have mentioned, that I think in China overseas, there's lots of criticism about their tactics. For instance, get iPhone for 9.9 yuan or 9.9 yuan for a bicycle.
And the iPhone was this size. They also sell some furniture, and the furniture could also be just 9.9 yuan. But after the arrival, after the goods arrived, you will see the chair is this big, the table this big. It's just a small toy.
Yeah, so sometimes the users didn't like look at it carefully, and the merchants took a photo of a model and of course zoomed in, so the user thought it was the real thing and was big, but actually they put things in fine print in product detail. It is a model, but the users felt that they were cheated. This is the first type. Second type is mainly in China, maybe not really overseas. Is well, you go there and they tell you that you can buy 9.9 yuan for iPhone, but actually it's not an iPhone. It's the opportunity to win an iPhone. So this is not exactly sort of illegal or breaking the law, but morally, I think people felt that they were cheated because they tell them that you can get iPhone for 9.9, and it's very small fine print saying that okay, it's just a lottery, but they have written the disclaimer. And of course, this has a lot of criticism. There's drawn lots of criticism, but if you look at the business per se, I mean, this method allowed them to acquire a lot of users at a very cheap cost, even though the users had polarized reviews about, I mean, whether this was ethical or not. Outside China, you don't have this kind of dividend to acquire users very, very cheaply, but they also have a lot of tactics, and sometimes they are actually very aggressive compared to their competitors in using these tactics. So when we look at the e-commerce platforms, I think Temu came in quite late, and there aren't many platforms with more than 100 billion GMV. So maybe they will become the first one after Amazon to achieve this. I think fundamentally they have learned ways to find to acquire customers at relatively low cost. Maybe, I mean, people around us, we are, I mean, at the like higher end of the consumption, so people don't see it and people don't understand Pinduoduo.
Yeah, many people couldn't see it at that time, and even people in China couldn't see it either. I wonder, like, if you know about the term users outside the fifth ring road that was popular back then.
Yeah, outside the fifth ring of Beijing.
Yeah, to explain to overseas users, it is said that if a city in China is like, it is said that a city in China is divided by a ring. The higher the ring, the bigger the ring.
So that's for users in mainly the suburbs.
Yeah, and then there was this saying that only users outside Beijing's fifth ring road would use Pinduoduo. About this, I remember something that left a deep impression on me. One year, I was in Beijing, and every investor I met kept asking me, "Have you heard of this thing called Kuaishou?" They were saying this thing completely escaped our attention, and now it already has 200 million users.
Oh, it used to be Kuaishou in the north and Douyin in the south, right? The people in north usually use Kuaishou.
Yeah, you have more Kuaishou users in the north. Yeah, you're right.
Right. This is quite interesting. You see, for people like us who move to big cities, there are a lot of things we don't know about. Here's an example. 2 years ago, I was in Vietnam. At that time, Mixue, the popular ice cream and tea brand in China, had already opened nearly 1,000 stores there. So when I was in Ho Chi Minh City, I asked all the investors I met about Mixue. They all said, "What's that? Never heard of it." I wasn't until later that an Inter spoke up. This Inter was from Haiphong, a second-tier city, and he said, "Oh, there's one near my house, and it's really good." So basically, even the investors in the city had never heard of it.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's the same as what Pinduoduo encountered in China, and also I think it's the same in the U.S., where all the people around you, investors, analysts, they are users of Amazon. So you don't have a strong feeling about Temu because you are not a typical user of Temu. But if you change the angle a little bit, I mean, today you see that Taobao and Alibaba actually have recovered a bit of market share, and became the highest sort of a DAU company, e-commerce company in China. Um, so at the end of the day, it's the users choosing, right? So Pinduoduo was growing fast in GMV, and the users are actually voting with their wallet. So we don't represent the majority. So quite often when we see this gap, because we see like your relatives using apps that you will never understand, is because we live in higher tier cities, more advanced cities. I think people living in New York sometimes would be very hard to get what people in suburban like Rust Belt would be feeling.
Yes, I remember back in last year, I talked to many friends in Brazil's e-commerce industry about this. Like local analysts, retailers, e-commerce practitioners, and even people working in logistics, all felt that Mercado Libre was doing really well. They said its services were great and it excelled in areas like finance, technology, self-built logistics, and the overall operations. It's basically similar to Amazon's model, but with an added focus on financial services. This is likely because at that time, finance in the US was already very advanced, especially in areas like payments. And one thing they found really puzzling was that when they came to China and talked to everyone, they kept saying, uh, Mali isn't doing well, but Shopee had a chance back then. However, they couldn't understand how Shopee, which was offering such low prices, low quality products, and poor service, and slow delivery times could possibly have an opportunity. Around 2020 or 2021, this was generally how people viewed Shopee. But now, when you look at Pinduoduo, people are actually looking at it with a very similar perspective.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how everyone try to sort of interpret this in China, and I think when we study mathematics, I study mathematics, and there's a concept called the greatest common divisor.
Yeah, the greatest common
Yeah.
divisor.
So the poor people, I mean, of course, I mean poor people with the quotation mark. I mean people who have relatively lower income. They are at the bottom of the pyramid.
Just like in any country.
So yes, when you draw comparisons, and of course each country will draw a line of the GDP per capita, and of course so in some countries you have more people who have little income, and the US we might have smaller people, but you would see that the focus on pricing would actually make it really easy for the masses to understand. I don't compete on speed. I don't compete on services. So even today, I mean, Pinduoduo's logistics speed is still the slowest amongst all the e-commerce companies. But users can accept that. I mean, I asked them. I mean, if you, I actually asked Pinduoduo, if you deliver fast to users, would that be better? And they said, oh yeah, we actually tried. I mean, we got the users to choose. We allow them to use SF Express, which was faster, but people voted with I mean slower logistics with a cheaper price.
Yeah, well, personally, I would choose something delivery faster, even it's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, that's you. But for most of the users, at the end of the day, 90% of the users didn't choose the fast delivery or didn't want to pay more, and instead they choose to wait for one more day. So that says that most of the users are still price sensitive. At the end of the day, you gave this sort of choice to the users, and at the end of the day, I think users choose the price, and they want a cheap price.
Yeah, because you can see the number.
Yes, because we say okay, fast delivery, etc., etc. I mean, people don't have the immediate feeling.
Well, my understanding to them is that they want to use the most affordable price, reasonable price, but within the range to provide the best services or products.
Yes, correct. They set price first, and within this price, they make sure they are the best compared to others at the same price range in terms of service and quality.
Yeah, there's an interesting point. I have talked about this Misha topic with some friends in the F&B industry before. Why is that Misha was able to expand so quickly in Southeast Asia, while other Chinese food and beverage brands like Nayuki struggle to scale. There's an interesting comparison here. I remember last year when I was in Thailand, I talked to some friends and they mentioned that they felt Misha's product line was very simple. The products Misha offers, like Snow King mascot, are cute but not particularly refined. However, when I went to check out Nayuki in person, it's clear that Nayuki is relatively more high-end. Nayuki focuses on refinement, but in Southeast Asia, I noticed local brands nearby, each refined in different ways. This highlights the idea of the greatest common divisor. A friend in F&B said Miche succeeds because it's cheap and universally understood. If you aim for a specific vibe or style, everyone interprets it differently, making it hard to appeal to everyone.
I think you just mentioned a very important factor here is that when the users are making a purchase decision, there are lots of factors of considerations. Maybe this piece of clothing is really beautiful, maybe this is cheap, maybe this goods is cheap, or maybe the quality is good, and or maybe that if I buy from JD or Amazon, it's fast delivery. So there are lots of purchase decisions that people use. But if you see that, okay, the savings value proposition is the most piercing. I mean, if you look back in history, you look at Costco, you look at Sam's Club, etc. At the end of the day, I mean, they don't make the money from the margins of the product. They make money from the membership fee, and if you could see that aside from membership fee, that they don't have any profit, so they don't make money from the product. So fundamentally, this goes back to the issue of price. Um, I think they control the quality of the product very well, and they give you extreme sort of value for money, and at the end, if you think about the still, I mean, the savings sort of value proposition is the most exact and the most appealing. And then we think about Michelin, it's probably the largest F&B chain already in the world, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably the largest. On January 1st, they announced their new IPO numbers. They have 45,000 stores already. It
More than
surpassed McDonald's.
yeah. So I think fundamentally this proves our point that the greatest common divisor, and I think the same can be applied to many different sectors.
Many overseas e-commerce companies like Meli in Latin America or Allegro in Poland were founded around 1999. After going public, they faced investor pressure to increase average order value and user monetization. In China, Alibaba and JD likely face similar pressures, where consumption upgrading often means higher value order values and brand participation. Pinduoduo, however, took the opposite approach. The question is, can this strategy last long term? Eventually, they might also face pressure to raise older values.
And of course, in a way that they must have the pressure, but of course this is also related to the macro environment. I think we all know that currently the global economic environment is on a downward trend. So people talk about deflation, etc. Fundamentally, I mean, for the consumers, that you have the issues that you need to make more out for the money in your wallet. So I think, of course, this benefited Temu and Pinduoduo. I asked similar questions and all those companies saying that, okay, the greatest common divisor in the US and developed countries, would that be different from China? When you try to sort of reach out to middle class or people above, would that be different? And they told us that, okay, you go and take a look at who is shopping and who, I mean, in the West, who are shopping at Costco, who are shopping at Walmart, and the Americans who shop in these places, what's their sort of average income? You would see that, and of course, in Costco, I mean, the quality is good, but their ability to lower the prices and their ability to control the supply chain is very strong. So you can see that amongst all the products they have, I mean, a significant percentage still have the lowest price. If I remember correctly, I think Costco targets people with about $100,000 annual income, and Walmart was about 70,000. So so this pathway works not only with people who don't have money, but people in the middle class with a bit of money, and then they will buy that as well. I mean, today in China, people buy iPhone from Pinduoduo.
Yeah, one of my MBA classmates, who's now a partner at McKinsey in Shanghai or something, has actually been using Pinduoduo more and more in recent years. And when I go to class reunions, everyone says the same thing. You can get the exactly same stuff for much cheaper price on Pinduoduo.
Yeah, so why would I spend more?
I really can't think of any reason to spend more money to buy the same thing.
Yes, correct.
So also, not everything I buy needs to arrive the same day. That's actually a relatively small need. And if I really need something quickly, I can just use Meituan for instant delivery.
Besides, Pinduoduo also gave the option of SF Express.
Yeah, they gave this option, and the users didn't choose it.
Right. So going back to this company, like I mentioned earlier about Walmart, I talked to a former Walmart colleague when I was in Shenzhen. He said that Pinduoduo has done many things similar to what we used to do, like squeezing suppliers and logistics and so on. But back then, our suppliers were manufacturers who expected long-term cooperation with us, so they wouldn't complain publicly. Now, however, with platforms like Douyin, when suppliers feel squeezed, they can publicly voice their complaints.
Well, I think it's similar. I mean, I've talked to friends who worked at Sam's Club and Walmart, and we all mentioned about the same issue. So aside from suppliers, I mean, back then, I mean, everybody went to BD, when everybody went to control the price. Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco, they are all very strong in this area. Of course, there's also something that everybody complain about. So, and when you have a team which is procurement, which is dealing with suppliers, then you will have corruption, and it's just a percentage. I mean, no matter I mean, it's just a percentage of how. Sorry, yeah. So so there's another issue that everyone criticizes about, I mean, whether it's Pinduoduo or even Alibaba and JD. So when you have a large procurement team, and surely you have some instances of corruption, and it's just a matter of ratio, right? I mean, if you have stronger control, there's lower corruption. I think this is something that people actually talk a lot about online as well. So I think that's also the reason why Pinduoduo hired lots of ex-public security officers to help them stamp this out. I mean, similar to what Walmart did in China before. There are lots of things, and fundamentally, and at the back, it's the same, right? I mean, but as we look at it today, I mean, you see from the angle of that them squeezing the suppliers, etc. And I think they become stronger in communicating with the suppliers. That's something to do with the situation in China, where you have a lot of supply, even oversupply. So, and when the users have fewer money less money to spend, and and uh, and of course, so and even if you look at Meituan and other companies, they started to offer lower priced items, and of course this means that the competition becomes even fierce. And we go back to the question of sort of a natural selection, right? So today, they are trying to. I mean, look at Pinduoduo. They are trying to iterate the supply chain. But at the end of the day, I feel that, I mean, every company has some social responsibility. Same for Pinduoduo. I think it's something to do with the founder and what they are really sort of trying to achieve. And everybody feels that, okay, would you always focus on low price? Would you always want the suppliers to keep lowering the price? And then when that happens, the suppliers would stop innovating, because innovation needs money, and it needs time, it needs money. So if you always force people to lower the price, and what they will do is that they will reduce the functions, they will make the specs smaller to make it cheaper. So, but it's different from, say, DJI and such stuff. They need to make money, so they need to invest to be able to innovate. So, will Pinduoduo make the whole sort of innovation environment deteriorate the whole supply chain? I think every company has a positioning. So somebody will solve the problem of value for money. Somebody will solve the problem of innovation, and I think every company chooses their positioning.
So if Temu or Pinduoduo already choose to solve the problem of cost effectiveness, will they always choose to solve the problem of cost effectiveness in the long run? Or do you think they will make any changes?
I think if you are consistent, you will become very, very strong, and you will become very, very sharp. So if you want to do this and that, if you want to do unbranded and branded at the same time, so I remember when the owner of Costco said that when he was before he passed away, and he said, okay, if Costco starts making money from product margins, I will jump out of my grave. So you can't make that money because if you try to do both, and your team will be split.
So cannot take good care of either ends.
Yeah, then you have a situation of different parts of the team fighting because people have different objectives, and that will make the organization slow.
So coming back to this point, if you look at how domestic players and Ali or JD are responding to Pinduoduo, I think it's also a process of self-exploration and reflection. In this process, what kind of insights or lessons could overseas e-commerce platforms like Amazon or Mercado gain from it? When people see Pinduoduo, everyone had different opinions about it. So even now, people still have varying perspectives. Some think that Temu is just like Wish or others before it, something that will eventually fade away. Others believe that we need to respond to it, that we need to compete by lowering prices. But when you actually try to lower prices, you will realize that your cost structure or burdens of your entire organization make it impossible to do so.
I think when we mentioned the value proposition of speed, savings, quality, and selection, and you can't do everything as an organization. Today, I think JD and Amazon only achieved part of that. Mercado Libre only achieved part of that. There are lots of other regional e-commerce platforms which have done it. And I think Pinduoduo chose their pathway as well. Today, we look at Pinduoduo, their female apparel section is still weak because no matter what they do, they can't do it as good as as Douyin, as JD, as Taobao, and that's its weakness. So when it focuses on price, it can't tell a brand story. It can't do something that people would sort of influencer would actually sell for others. So you need more emotions in that. So today, LOD, when you go and buy clothes, you would not say that, okay, I buy because it's cheap. It has to be good, pretty first, and then we can see that whether I can afford it. So this example of clothing, I think for eating is the same, right? I can't say that, okay, because I want to be cheap, so I eat like plain buns every day.
Yes, I need some emotional values.
Yes, emotional values or sort of experiences. Unless you are really at the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, otherwise you need some emotional value.
And then you give up this value.
Okay, yeah. So I think similarly, you can also look at the Maslow hierarchy. So today, when you look at the positioning of e-commerce platforms, I think the same you can map into F&B and the brands, etc. Do you want to be Xiaomi or do you want to be iPhone? I think you don't have to be Xiaomi. You can become iPhone, but it is hard to become iPhone. They need lots of innovation. But when you become Xiaomi and focus on the mass needs, you will feel that things are relatively easier for you. When we study engineering, there's a term called Occam's razor. So when things become simpler, they become sharper. And when you are really, really simple, then you don't need lots of discussion. You just execute. So back to the question that you have, fundamentally, where do you find your value proposition? Just now we mentioned about the sort of sorry，那今天回到那个 yeah just now we mentioned about real-time e-commerce. So another value proposition that we have seen emerging is laziness, right? I mean, people want to stay at home and make orders to be delivered to their house, not because that things that they do is cheaper or faster.
Also because they have more products online.
Or because that there are lots of different value propositions.
I'm not sure about this, but for your generation, many of my former classmates who are now living in Shanghai, it's really like this.
Yes.
So when they went down to convenience store to pick up a group buy item, not because of timing, but because he thought it was too much trouble. Ideally, someone delivers it downstairs or directly to his doorstep. That's the best scenario.
Sabrina tells me she wants to buy an eye drop last night. I told her when we go back to our hotel on the roadside, there will be a convenience shop. We can buy there. She says, "You help me to buy from Meituan. I'll ask my robot friend to send me to our room door."
Yes, fundamentally, if you compare it, I mean, if you go down and to buy it, it might need only 15 minutes. But if you buy from an online platform for instant delivery, it needs 30 minutes. So it's not necessarily faster, and second, it's not cheaper. But when you are lazy and you want to do it, so also another value proposition is the selection. I think today and LED, if you want to buy sort of contact lenses, girls like that, and in the past you might just buy one color, and today you want to buy a stack of 5 different colors. So when I go and buy it, I hope to buy a variety, but of course the offline sort of convenience stores might not be able to carry that much inventory.
You can't stock so much inventory, right?
Then you can see, with the front-loaded warehouses or dark stores, so you can do that. I think the laziness will come in the future, just as so sort of savings was key focus in the past. I think every platform needs to find its positioning, its value proposition to the users.
So what's really needed here, just like when I previously talked with friends in retail, is that a kind of strong consumer insights that companies like Costco or Sam's Club rely on. You absolutely need to understand what consumers want and how these trends are shifting. Using this knowledge to decide your direction is crucial because otherwise all these so-called needs are just things you have imaged in your head.
Yeah, today when we look at the e-commerce platforms, when you are sort of attacked by Pinduoduo or Temu, and you feel that okay, if I don't transform, that then I will become sort of very hard and very anxious. When we look at Amazon, Amazon started Amazon Haul, the low-cost version, and then they'll do something like similar to TikTok to be defensive. But at the end of the day, nobody can do it very well. I think fundamentally the anxiety comes from. I mean, Alibaba is strong, JD is strong. They are strong, but people feel that they are weak. In our angle, they feel they are weak because Pinduoduo has been growing too fast. And but we have to remember that they grew from zero, and of course you are fast. And when you are already there, for you to find the same growth, it's very hard. It's naturally slow.
It's naturally slow.
Yeah, it is slow. So because you are already a big company, and today, we look at Temu, you feel that it's growing super fast, but it's only like a 50 billion GMV, and Amazon already 800 billion. So there's a huge difference. And when Pinduoduo came from zero, of course they are growing fast.
So you might see Amazon approaching these things more as an internal experiment. What we can observe is that they are trying out some things, but they haven't invested a lot of resources into it. From a higher level perspective, I think their awareness is still clear. They want to understand the situation by doing it themselves. However, in short term, if they heavily invest in this, they risk losing their original advantages and they will deviate.
Hmm. I think the fundamental behind it is that for everything, if at this particular point of time you are growing very fast, is because you find something a value proposition that matches the macro environment, and of course with all the infrastructure of payment etc., then you can do it. In the past when you didn't have logistics, when you didn't have payment, it would be very difficult for Pinduoduo to start. And of course, there's also a issue of monopoly. If there was no WeChat Pay, if Alipay was the only player, and then they would basically prevent Pinduoduo from rising, right?
How do you see the consequence of that? Specifically, how do you view the future development of Pinduoduo and Temu? For example, by 2025, we can observe that in some of their key markets, they are shifting their business model from a fully managed retail-like approach to a model that focuses more on local fulfillment. So, in your opinion, will their core strategy still revolve around low prices, or do you think this will evolve over time?
In my understanding, until today, Pinduoduo I think probably has about more than 3 trillion or less than 4 trillion RMB GMV in China, and they are still insisting on savings and value for money. And of course, you also have brands, but they don't actually invite brands to come to Pinduoduo. Uh, not necessarily. Because like the brands are actually resistant, right? Because when they asked brands to be selling this as the cheapest across all channels, and of course brands are resistant. But we look behind when we see that okay, when you as a platform you try to do A, B, and C, and historically you have been doing A and you are very strong. But when you try to sort of do B and C at the same time, you become weak. Fundamentally, I think at the end of the day, you still need to come back and be focused. I think Pinduoduo's organization is this kind of organization as well. Is we think very carefully about what we want to do, and when we were in the internet sector, and everyone talks about trial and error, but for Pinduoduo it's different. They have to trial and make it right. So the logic is that either I don't do it. If I do it, I go all in.
This is quite interesting. Over the past couple of days in Hangzhou, I've heard countless complaints about the concept of trial and error. The core issue with that seems to be that people often don't think things beforehand. Even when something works, you don't really know why it worked. Instead, you end up doing all sorts of post-mortem analysis afterward. Exactly. So this often makes it difficult to determine the real reason behind the failure when something goes wrong. I feel that in terms of root cause analysis, people generally don't dig deep enough either.
Yes, I think fundamentally, if you want to trial and make it right, and it's more demanding to the decision makers and founders.
Yes. Previously, internally, we had a sharing. Jiang gave us a quote that its company if it has been successful in the past period of time, then they must have done something right. I think it's from the sharing of Fai and Hua.
So, from a candidate perspective, many times you don't necessarily know which specific actions were right or what it exactly lead to your success.
Yeah, fundamentally, as Jiang just mentioned, if you attribute the success to the wrong factor, when you are successful, you think it's because your organization is strong, but the actual case might be that you are in the right environment. When you try to do the next thing, you try to apply the same organizational strength to the next thing, and you realize that things don't work. So quite often, people make wrong attribution to the reasons of success. I think when I look at Pinduoduo as a company, so the logic that they have applied in China would be manifested in how Temu is doing outside China. Temu now is very small; it's only like 50 billion US dollars GMV. But I think in future it has lots of room for growth. If it insists on savings, as we say, there are 7 billion out of 8 billion people in this globe who actually care about savings, and that's, I mean, even if you exclude China or India, because of course they can't enter India, and then there's a huge room. So $50 billion in this is still very, very small. So they have lots of room for growth.
So going back to what we were discussing earlier, how they are sharply focusing on this point, there's still a plenty room for growth. That's because their organization is relatively simple and top-down with strong execution capabilities. If the market changes one day and they need to pivot, they might be able to adapt faster than others. So, Kaifei, do you agree with this, or would you think, or would you see it differently?
Yeah.
Or just looking from another perspective. So do you think that if Pinduoduo or Temu eventually becomes a truly global company, one that's big enough in multiple markets around the world, will they suffer from the so-called big company syndrome?
Yeah, I think, certainly 100%. It's just a matter of time. And I think this will manifest in all the countries, all the companies in all the countries. Even in China, we talk about dynasties. I mean, historically, nobody was able to be lasting forever. I mean, it's the same for companies. When you become big, you will have the malice of big companies, but you can sort of delay that. Where you try to attribute, there are a few reasons for companies to be, large corporates to become slow and have malice. And the first is the company becomes old. I think the older the company is, and it's easy for it to be slow. I think this is positively correlating with each other. And second, what's behind it? Sometimes, I mean, when the founding team is gone, they've made enough money and they don't care about it anymore, and people have different motivation. When you first started the company, you want to make money, but at some point in time, you want to retire. So of course, when professional managers take over, I mean, they might be professional, but they might have very different incentives. They might be more conservative. So and as more and more people join the company, it may become chaotic, and the communication cost increases. So fundamentally, and lots of decisions are also based on like personal interests. So and also you need to look at, I mean, how successful and focused this company is at a particular business. The reason why there are always opportunities for startups is because when for big companies, the CEOs only have attention for limited staff, and for the rest, they have to use proxies and people. So, but as a startup, you are the CEO, and you have to make it work. And the second is that you don't have a sort of backup option for managers. If if things don't work out, I can always do something else. So today, when we look at Pinduoduo, you see that they are trying actively to delay the emergence of all these issues. I mean, of course, it's relatively younger. It's like more than 10 years younger compared to Alibaba and JD. But I think Colin Huang also said that in 10 years' time, they may become old as well. So, of course, you will become old. And the second is that I think the founding team is still there. So when we look at the Pinduoduo, I mean, the founding team are still there, and the key people have been with Colin Huang for more than 10 years, but they are still there. So so they have proven to the world that I mean, the organization has been able to like stick together for a long time. Then we look at the HR efficiency of the company, and but of course, when you compare the HR efficiency, it's not apples to apples, because JD has logistics and Alibaba before had retail, and of course, they had lots of people. But when you go to the fundamental core business for Alibaba is Taobao, Temu, and we compare that to Pinduoduo, and even for that, I think for Pinduoduo is much more efficient compared to their competitors.
Question: what are your thoughts on the impact Temu has brought about? From a business perspective, I find it incredibly interesting. But looking at how competitors are responding or adapting to it is one thing. Another thing is there's the question of how governments or local policymakers should deal with this. Recently, we have seen many governments expressing concerns because for most countries, Temu is still operating on a cross-border model. This type of cross-border model inevitably impacts the local retail sector and, in some cases, even the manufacturing industry of certain countries. So, if I were a policymaker in any of those countries, how should I approach and respond to this situation?
I think you look at the issue from two approaches. First is the influence, and you look at, how big the influence would be. I think it's still controllable. For certain countries, it's a bigger impact. For other countries, the impact is smaller, but overall, I think it's controllable. Why? We look at countries where the GDP per capita is lower and people are willing to wait for more time to get the parcel. But for people in developed countries, the mainstream people, it's hard for them to wait a long time to get a cheaper parcel, right?
So their users are more segmented and their needs are increasingly diverse.
Yeah. Today you tell me that if I'm in a developed country, today tell me that things are cheaper by a few dollars, but you ask me for wait for 10 more days. If you ask me for 3 days, I can accept, but 10 more days is too much. So and I think in many countries, Temu is not necessarily much cheaper compared to Amazon. So, but when you need to wait for 10 days, 20 days, I think the mainstream would find it hard to accept. This is the first point. In different countries with different sort of income levels, the users' demands would be different and the tolerance would be different. So when you're at the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy, and of course, I think this is the first point. I think users in different countries with different GDP per capita would have different demands and different tolerance levels. I think the second issue is cross-border. Today we see that there's a severe bottleneck of capacity of logistics, and it can't grow fast. And it probably can grow like 20, 30, 40% per year, but you will slow down when you become 100 billion, 200 billion in GMV, and we divide into different countries. It's probably not that big.
Yep. So Pinduoduo's rapid growth now is largely due to a small starting base, but it's unlikely to sustain. Pinduoduo's rapid growth now largely due to a small starting base, but it's unlikely to sustain. The bigger it gets, the harder it becomes to maintain such high growth rates.
It starts from a small base, but the growth curve will flatten. So I think if you do the research, you can count like how many planes are actually flying out of China.
Yes, very exact.
We've done the calculation. It's quite hard. It's quite hard for the air capacity to grow 100%. So I think moving forwards, 20, 30% of growth will already be the maximum. We divide it across all the countries, the impact will be limited. And also, I think we see that the Temu has started working on local merchants and local marketplaces. At the end of the day, I think they also try to localize because they have to, and when they do that, the impact of the local ecosystem would be smaller. And I think from the government's point of view, and each government would find that okay, what do they need? What does the industry in this country need to, and they will make adjustments accordingly.
Yes, the industry dynamics differ in every country.
Yeah, for example, if something that I don't really produce, I need import anyway, so I become more tolerant. But if today, and the goods sold are exactly what my country is producing, of course it will impact the industry. Fundamentally, so we see that countries could look at each other and actually copy. So when we look at things which have impacted certain industries in other countries, and you can make that analysis, and then you can make policies accordingly. So for instance, there could be some good points when you are at local warehouse. When you are sort of entering a country, you need to build the logistics, you need to build the supply chain, you need to make everything online, and you need to improve the online payment experience. So this actually helps with economy. In general, and in many countries. I think in most countries, and of course the improvement and the increase of e-commerce penetration is a good thing.
So again, it's the concept of being the later one.
Yeah, you just look and how things to go and copy.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's all good. I think I learned a lot today.
Yeah, it's very fruitful, meaningful.
So that's about it. Uh, we have covered a lot. Thank you, Kaifei. So in the future, we will be visiting Hangzhou often. So let's connect more whenever you're there. Many of these topics can actually be explored in more depth. Things are constantly evolving, and we are discussing today is already quite different from 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you for joining us today, Kaifei. Hope you have enjoyed the video. Subscribe to our channel and see you next time.